That's more than a mile. Impossible shot, Chris.
It's him.
You can't even see that far out.
Aim small, miss small.
You're gonna make a fine hunter someday.
The movie opens with U.S. Navy SEAL sniper Chris Kyle overseeing the movement of SEAL troops from a rooftop. He then notices a man observing the troops and talking on his cell. Soon the man disappears and a woman and a boy step out from a building in front of the troops, and the woman passes a grenade to the boy. Chris calls it in and gets the green light to terminate any threats in the area. His spotter warns that if he's wrong, command will have his career, but Chris locks in. The boy starts running toward the soldiers, and just as Chris fires, there is a flashback to him hunting deer with his father. His first shot is a clean one, and his father praises his skills, suspecting he will be a great hunter. Chris's upbringing was no joke, as his father was extremely strict but fair, instilling in his boys life lessons about protecting family, not to start fights, but to ensure they have the fortitude to finish it if need be. Years later, Chris, now a rodeo cowboy and farmhand, finishes out a show and heads home with his brother Jeff, only to walk in on his woman with another man and kicks the guy out. His woman complains that he is away every weekend with Jeff, but Chris just kicks her out also. Later he is watching the news with Jeff when he sees reports of attacks against U.S. embassies and the mass casualties, and this seems to ignite a fire inside him. The next day he turns up at the recruitment office with an urge to fight, and the recruiter thinks he would make a fine SEAL. Not long after Chris enlists, and is instantly targeted for being 30 and old.
Damn, you old as fuck!
But his resilience is far superior to most, and he powers through. One night he meets a beautiful woman, Taya, at an Irish pub in San Diego, and they instantly hit it off. She is a bit hesitant to talk to a SEAL because one bad apple dated her sister, but Chris's genuine yet confident attitude is too much for her to turn away. Where Chris really stood out was in sniper school, his father's teachings really showing through his shooting. He and Taya go on a few dates, and soon things get serious between them, eventually moving in together. On September 11th, Chris sees the towers get hit, and, just like the embassy bombings, it adds more fuel to his already raging fire. Knowing he will soon be deployed, Chris and Taya get married, and as expected, on his wedding day they get confirmation of deployment. Though Taya is afraid for him, Chris is ready, reassuring her that he will only be gone for 6 weeks. For his first tour, Chris is deployed to Fallujah with his goal to provide overwatch for Marines going door-to-door checking for insurgents. On the ground he learns about a notorious Taliban sniper and former Olympian named Mustafa, who has been hitting headshots from more than 500 yards out. This takes us back to the first scene with the woman and boy approaching the convoy of soldiers. Without hesitation, Chris eliminates the first threat, then takes out the woman when she attempts to throw the grenade herself. Though command and the Marines congratulate him, this first act visibly shakes Chris, and later after returning to barracks, he expresses to another Marine that he didn't envision his first kill going the way it did. The following day, he is providing support for the soldiers and takes out an unseen enemy which startles but impresses the Marines.
That was your overwatch, Einstein.
A car soon comes racing toward the patrol, and the Marines open fire, but Chris's shot is the fatal one, stopping the car in its tracks and saving the Marines from an explosion. A few hours later, he takes out a man trying to plant an explosive, and a lone insurgent fighter. But when night falls is when the real danger begins. Mustafa gains access to a home nearby and fatally takes out a Marine on patrol before disappearing. When Chris is relieved, it's revealed he eliminated 8 threats, more than all the other snipers combined for that day, and his fellow SEALs and Marines hail him as the legend. Taya calls wanting to know every detail of what is going on over there while he is on Overwatch duty and gets irritated when he cannot talk. To be fair, she is pregnant, but Chris reassures her that he is fine and misses her. She then reveals that Jeff has also deployed and is heading to Iraq, news Chris never wanted to hear. Chris joins a Marine briefing where their main target is identified as Jordanian militant Zarqawi, trained and funded by bin Laden with an army of 5,000 trained fighters. The commander wants the house-to-house checks ramped up to 10 houses per hour until he is either captured or dead. Chris thinks he could do a better job on the streets leading a unit, but his fellow SEAL want him to stick to Overwatch, as the Marines feel invincible knowing he is up there. The following day the intense mission gets underway and Chris is on duty, but soon an injured Marine is being dragged back. He decides then to go clear houses with the Marines as there's nothing much he can do from his current location, and he refuses to sit idle. He joins up with a team and takes lead. They hit a home where they find a sheik and his entire family still living there despite the warnings to evacuate. The sheik is terrified, warning that they cannot see him talking to the soldiers or he will be in trouble, so Chris has the Marines secure the home. They interrogate the sheik and learn he is afraid of a man nicknamed the Butcher, Zarqawi's #1 man. Chris demands Zarqawi's location. The sheik is hesitant, but Chris promises to get him and his family to safety if they get any information. They then get the name Amir Fanis and head back to base where they verify the name as legit and plan to pay the sheik $100,000 for more information. Chris hits the road with a few Marines and DIA agents to talk more with the sheik, unaware that Mustafa has a lock on their location. Chris gets a call from Taya, confirming that they will be having a boy. Just as Chris starts celebrating, Mustafa expertly snipes their driver. Their gunner returns fire, but he is soon taken out, along with a DIA agent. The agents grab the money and take off, leaving Chris pinned down with the remaining soldiers. All this time, Taya hears the gunshots and tearfully calls for Chris to respond to her. They get a beat on Mustafa's location, but are being pinned down by gunfire. And to make things worse, the Butcher has gotten to the sheik's son and is threatening to harm him out in the open with a drill. Chris pops a smoke grenade to provide cover before trying to get to the roof. The Butcher then begins his torture with the drill, but Mustafa is keeping Chris behind cover. He tries to get a shot off but takes a bullet to his helmet, and the sheik and his son are killed. By the time Chris gets to let off shots in Mustafa's direction, both he and the Butcher have left the scene. The entire situation is seen as a mess to upper command, who shut down their operation pending an investigation. Chris soon returns home after his first deployment to a worried Taya, who hasn't heard from him since the gunfight. He follows her to her doctor's appointment one day, where the doctor learns about his deployment and decides to do a blood pressure check, only to see that it is extremely high, but Chris promises to look into it. Taya then gives him a hard time on their way back as he hasn't been talking as much, but Chris swears he is fine despite a war being fought that nobody seems to care about. At that moment, Taya starts having contractions, and a few hours later they welcome their son. Despite this, Chris is unable to pull himself away from the war, and Taya is concerned about his well-being and urges him to return to his family. Chris's second deployment sees him returning as Chief Petty Officer. He runs into Jeff at an airbase, but Jeff looks shaken up, revealing he wants to get out and go back home. Chris expresses how proud he is of Jeff and sends him on his way before boarding a chopper and heading to the front lines. There he learns that a $180,000 bounty has been placed on his head by the Iraqi fighters and that they have a hit on the Butcher, and command has given him the green light to form his own team to hunt him down. Chris and his team soon hit a location and breach the premises where they encounter a family. He demands that they identify a photo of the Butcher, but the family claims to have no idea, so the team decides to dig in for the night until they get answers. That night his team gets a hit on the Butcher's location across the street, but he is with approximately 16 fighters, and they know it's going to be a brutal fight. Later, the man whose home they are in decides to make them dinner, so they accept and everyone sits for the meal around the table. Everything is going well until Chris notices the man's extremely bruised elbow and becomes suspicious. He gets up from the table and goes checking around the house when he comes upon a hole in the floor filled with weapons. Without any word, Chris grabs the man, and the entire team gathers to see the stockpile. He offers the man a choice: get sent off to detention or help them get into the basement next door. In a few minutes, Chris leads the team, who take up positions outside the target building with a sniper providing cover a distance off. They then send in the father as a decoy to get the door open, and the sniper drops the first man and the dad when he tries to pick up a gun. The team then begins to clear the lower floor, but their position soon comes under gunfire. Fighters come streaming out of every dark corner, forcing the team into a tactical retreat. Even the sniper position gets hit with an RPG, and in the chaos Chris sees the Butcher making his escape in a car, but pursues and opens fire, managing to blow the car up. Meanwhile, Mustafa is alerted to Chris's location and begins moving towards him. Residents then begin to gather, protesting in the street, so Chris orders the team to move out. Mustafa gets to the scene, but narrowly misses the men. Chris soon returns home and is at the garage with his son, where a man there keeps staring at him. Eventually, the man comes over, introducing himself and revealing that Chris actually saved his life in Fallujah. He ended up losing his leg, but is more worried about his friends that lost their minds, and this seems to strike a note with Chris. The man invites him to join him and other vets at the VA office, but Chris seems uncomfortable with the expressing of emotions. He then goes to see his newborn baby girl in the hospital. The baby begins to cry and the nurses seem to be ignoring her, causing Chris to lose his temper and yell at them. At home, Taya is giving him a hard time for not being around physically and mentally, and thinks she is making memories all by herself. He thinks they have all the time, but Taya thinks he is wrong if he believes the war isn't changing him. Chris heads back for a third tour. He is part of a convoy of 2 cars trailing the butcher's courier through the narrow streets, but men keeping a lookout spot them and contact Mustafa, who grabs his rifle and takes to the rooftops. As they near the target location, the van they're trailing suddenly opens fire on them, so Chris returns fire on the van. The van comes to a stop, and they take out the shooter, but the driver has escaped into nearby buildings. Chris and another SEAL, Biggles, clear a building to its roof when they learn the target has been eliminated. The 2 are heading back down when Biggles is sniped by Mustafa. Chris returns fire while calling for backup, but Mustafa gets away. Chris brings a severely injured Biggles downstairs where vehicles bring him back to base for medical attention. The SEALs regroup and everyone is out for blood. They have intel about a stronghold nearby, and Chris decides to head back out right away, and the SEALs are with him. On the road, they quickly dispatch a car of Taliban fighters before getting to their location. They clear the building where they realize someone left in a hurry, but as soon as they continue on, another SEAL, Mark, is killed in a hail of bullets from shooters on a neighboring rooftop. They engage the shooters, but there is no hope for Mark. Chris returns home for Mark's funeral, where a letter Mark wrote is read, expressing his regret in taking part in the war. Afterwards, Taya wants to know what Chris thought about the letter, but he thinks the letter proved Mark gave up, and that's what killed him. He then goes to visit Biggles, who is now blind from his injuries. Biggles is grateful that his fiancée has decided to stick with him, and glad it happened to him and not Chris, as he notes how Chris is now the deadliest sniper in US history. Chris plans to deploy again, to make those terrorists pay for what they did to him. That night, he casually tells Taya that she will find someone else if something happens to him. He tries to convince her that he is fighting this war to protect her, but Taya reminds him about his children and thinks he has sacrificed enough. Chris can only see himself serving his country. Taya breaks down, then warns that if he leaves again, she nor the kids may be here when he returns. Despite this, Chris deploys for a 4th time where he learns that Biggles passed away on the operating table, and this news hits hard. He is then deployed as a sniper to protect a convoy. He spots a man about to fire a rocket launcher and takes him out, but the man's son goes over to his father and the weapon. Chris silently urges him not to pick it up, but the boy picks up the launcher. Chris hesitates, pleading with him to drop it, and the boy does just that, leaving Chris to catch his breath in relief. Back at base, he learns that Army engineers building a barricade are being killed by a sniper over 1,000 meters away. Chris suspects it's Mustafa, but the commanders don't care, they just want that sniper dead. Chris and the team are shuttled out and dropped off deep within enemy territory, where they clear an abandoned structure up to the rooftops before setting up sniping positions. As the engineers are working below, we see Mustafa taking up his sniping position, then killing an engineer. Chris and the team realize they're facing the wrong direction and quickly reposition. To make the situation worse, Taliban fighters begin moving around their building. Chris picks up an anomaly around 2,100 yards away, and the Marines don't believe he can even see that far out. They tell him not to shoot as it could give away their position. Despite this, Chris lines up a shot, then confirms that he has located the sniper. More soldiers start moving, and Mustafa begins to line up his next shot. Chris's fellow SEAL tells him to take the shot, so Chris relaxes and reminds himself he is doing this for Biggles. He fires and the bullet travels for what seems like forever before hitting its target and killing Mustafa. His shot, however, has alerted the fighters around the building to their position, and they start to swarm the building and nearby locations. An intense gunfight soon erupts, and the enemy is engaging from every angle. The Marines and SEALs hold their ground, but are gradually being overrun with their evacs still minutes out. The teams start running low on ammo, so the soldiers call in an airstrike on their exact position. Amidst the gunfire, Chris calls Taya, tearfully telling her that he is ready to come home, but a massive incoming sandstorm makes it impossible for her to hear him. A chopper approaches to fire a missile at the building, but the sandstorm causes it to miss its target. Unable to hold their position, Chris's team decide to move, and like a blessing in disguise, the heavy sandstorm hits, providing the soldiers cover to escape the building just as their evac arrives. Chris is making his way to the truck when he gets hit by a bullet and falls. The truck almost leaves him, but his fellow SEAL refuses to leave without him. Chris manages to get to his feet and chase the truck down before he is dragged on board. He soon gets back home and stops to have a drink in a bar. He gets home but is visibly distant and lost inside his head. At a get-together in their yard, Chris sees a dog playing with his son, and this triggers him to the point he almost strikes the dog before Taya yells out to him. This incident makes him realize that he needs to visit the psychiatrist, who wonders if he regrets any of his 160 kills, but Chris thinks he was just protecting his guys. He does, however, confess that he is haunted by the guys he couldn't have saved, so the doctor suggests that he could continue saving soldiers at the VA hospital. After a while, Chris starts to get involved with the veterans and helping them to find their way while using it as therapy himself. He gradually starts adjusting to civilian life, even bringing his son to go hunting like his father did. Years later, in 2013, Chris leaves the house in good spirits to help out a troubled veteran, Eddie Ray Routh, and that is the last time Chris was seen alive as he was killed that day by Eddie. We then see footage of Chris's funeral procession with crowds of people lining the highway to say goodbye to an American legend. Thanks for watching. If you had a good time, go ahead and hit that like button, drop a comment, and of course, subscribe for more recaps just like this. And hey, don't click away just yet. YouTube thinks you'll love one of these two videos popping up right here, so check them out next.